could have your attention, please. I want to welcome everybody to the July 23rd meeting of the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. We'll call the meeting to order now and ask Ms. Carter, please, to call the roll.
Mr. Coe?
Here.
Secretary Hargett?
Here.
Dr. Hayburn? Ms. Kadar? Sorry. Mr. Kinsey?
Here.
Ms. Coben? Here. Mr. Kustoff?
Here.
Mr. Lee?
Here.
Treasurer Lillard?
Here.
Mr. Martin?
Here.
Ms. Martin?
Here.
Ms. Roach? Here. Mayor Wharton? Comptroller Wilson? Mr. Wilson?
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. Let me first start by complimenting staff for the excellent presentations yesterday during the workshop. The workshop yesterday was broadcast on live stream, I believe. Is that right? So anyone who missed it, didn't get an opportunity, please take a look at that because staff did an outstanding job as usual presenting us with the information that we have to consider to make these decisions we have before us this morning. So my compliments to Dr. Deaton and his staff. We have two new faces here with us on the Higher Education Commission. I'd like to introduce, first of all, Siri Kadir, who is a medical student at UT Memphis. And I know we did this a little bit yesterday, but Siri, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself to the commission.
Again, I'm Siri Kadir. I'm a medical student at Vanderbilt for undergrad. I'm here because of policy.
And I also want to introduce Mr. David Kustoff, who is a new THEC member from Memphis. David?
Good morning. I'm David Kustoff. I'm a lawyer in Memphis, live in Germantown. Served as United States Attorney for the Western District of Tennessee for a few years in the 2000s, and I'm honored to be part of the commission. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Also want to take an opportunity to recognize Dennis Jones, who's a familiar face to many of us, president of the National Center for Higher Education and Management Systems, and we're grateful for you being here today. All right. Well, if there are no other opening comments, we have before us adoption of the agenda. I will note that staff has recommended consent agenda for items 1B, 1C, and 1G. I do want to also point out that these items were thoroughly discussed yesterday in the workshop. Staff has recommended for the purposes of time management that we place those on the consent agenda. So unless any member of the commission has an objection, I will entertain a motion for adoption of the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Next, we will review the minutes, and these minutes, commission members, were forwarded to you earlier this month, and at this point I will entertain a motion to adopt the minutes as presented.
So moved.
Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Duly seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. As I mentioned at the initial outset of my comments, we had a really thorough, robust work session yesterday. We have obviously consideration of the new funding formula that the commission members have spent a lot of time working on, and we'll review that today and decide on that. Dr. Deaton, I'll turn it over to you for the comments on the, I guess, on the new TSACA, Tennessee Promise Director.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to extend my welcome to Siri and David as well. Thank you for being here. I want to introduce the new Director of Tennessee Promise on the THEC staff, who I believe, Mr. Chairman, you'd like to provide an update along with Mike Krause, familiar face to us on Drive to 55, to come up here in a moment. James Snyder, if you're in the room, yes, James, please wave or stand up, or do both, actually. James is the new Tennessee Promise Director for THEC, former outreach specialist on the staff, and has served with us for several years now, and has hit the ground running unlike any other staffing we've ever had, and has really taken charge of a lot of the details and trying to really help implement Tennessee Promise across the state. So, James, glad you're with us, and thank you for being here today.
All right, we'll call on Mike Krause and James Snyder at this point to give their reports.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Deaton, and members of the Commission. Just wanted to come and bring you an update on the larger Drive to 55 initiative as it currently stands. So we're really, at this point, 2 years out of the launch of the Drive to 55. I would say since then, the agenda for higher education in Tennessee really has become the Drive to 55 across all sectors, public and private. We've seen some pretty unprecedented cooperation, I think, among all our colleges. I want to highlight a few specific initiatives, and then the Tennessee Promise, obviously being the centerpiece of the Drive to 55, we'll go in depth on that. So when you look at the full scope of Drive to 55, I'll just tell you, this is a set of 12 initiatives. You've heard me say this before. I'll say it again. There are states doing some of these initiatives. There is no state doing all of these initiatives all at once, simultaneously. The best positive progress that we can report right now is a pretty unprecedented increase in FAFSA filings, which we discussed in April. At that time in April, we were aware that Tennessee had become the #1 state in the nation for FAFSA, which actually is not incredibly unprecedented for Tennessee. We've kind of jockeyed back and forth with Kentucky for a couple years. What is unprecedented is really the level to which we are #1. So we grew over even our high FAFSA completion 12% more in 12 months. And then in May, we were informed that of all FAFSA completion growth nationwide, our state alone was 40%. And that's, I think, a really good indicator that we're headed the right direction. We absolutely attribute that to Tennessee Promise, putting in that deadline, requiring students to complete that structure. I want to highlight a few specific initiatives, really, just to give you a brief update. So the Tennessee Promise Summer Bridge Program, those are underway as we speak. We recognize that with Tennessee Promise, we are bringing in a student who may well be underprepared and perhaps wasn't even planning on attending college at all. We're trying to give those students an opportunity to come to campus in a low-risk environment and get to know college, gain fluency in navigating college, and ultimately, hopefully, take care of their remedial requirements. We have almost 600 students statewide enrolled in these as we speak. I'm visiting all of them. I will tell you, very anecdotally, but when you talk to the students, we are hearing exactly what we hoped we would hear. We are hearing, I really wasn't going to go to college, and then I heard that it was going to be free. And so that's an exciting thing, and also just to have the students on campus finally, after almost a year and a half of discussion, is exciting. We are continuing to move forward with our veteran initiatives. You all have heard me talk about this several times, both when I was at THEC and now. Tennessee has an unprecedented number of veterans enrolled in Tennessee higher education right now. We are trying to ensure we're pursuing a pretty unvarnished goal to be the best state in the nation for veterans in higher education. Our college leaders are mobilizing around that goal. And right now in the field, we have an RFP that THEC is administering for the Veteran Reconnect program. That is to provide funds to campuses to design interventions for veterans. That RFP is open, and on August 4th, we'll meet to make those selections. And then finally, I just wanted to talk about Tennessee Reconnect. So as you all know, after we launched Tennessee Promise, we pretty immediately pivoted towards adult students. We know that no matter how well we do with high schoolers in Tennessee Promise, we don't get to Drive to 55 without adults. And the first phase of that was the Tennessee Reconnect grant for TCATs. Essentially what we've done is a Tennessee Promise-like program where students are able to attend a TCAT tuition-free. And these are adult students. We require them to be adult students to receive the scholarship. We had hoped to receive 8,000 applicants. We had about 11,000. And we think that'll translate to roughly 2,000 to 3,000 TCAT attendees this fall. I think a really great second order benefit that we've heard from the TCAT leaders under Chancellor Morgan is that was probably more single visibility than our technical colleges had ever had in history. There was an ad campaign. Their doors were open. They had really high student volume. And everybody knows our TCATs do great nationally recognized work. Anytime we can get a Tennessean into a place with an 85% job placement rate, we feel good about that. So Tennessee Promise, we're at a really unique phase right now. First, we finally have somebody to really be focused on the implementation at the TSAC level, as you all just heard from James. For about a year, Pete Abernathy and Tim Phelps, out of the goodness of their hearts, were running Tennessee Promise's gears while also doing the Hope gears that they always had to do in the lottery scholarship gears. We're really happy to have James on to just focus on that piece. The big thing for Tennessee Promise this month is community service. As you all know, Tennessee Promise is free. It's tuition free. It is not free, though. You have to do some things. And one of those things is 8 hours of community service. At the beginning of the month, very frankly, we were a little concerned. Only 20% of our students had completed their community service. We immediately began talking to the press and parents, a lot of parents, about why their students needed to complete community service. We have had a well over 20% increase in 2 weeks. We're now at 44% complete, 13,000 students and 106,000 community service hours collectively performed across the state. We think that's the largest single community service effort in the state's history. We're verifying that. It certainly represents, again, though, another second-order benefit of the program to have that many students back in their communities. I'm going to defer to James now because he's going to walk you through. So remember, behind Tennessee Promise and what we say to students are a lot of mechanisms that have to work at the campus level, and James has really been leading that work. Any questions of me? Yes, ma'am.
That graphic on the Drive to 55 website?
It is.
Okay, good.
It is, and certainly we can send it to THEC and they can distribute.
Like based on what you said a moment ago about the community service, you said at one point at the beginning of the month you had 20% had completed the requirement. You feel better now that the additional 20%. So is it 40% that's now completed that requirement?
Yes, sir. About 44%.
Okay. When does the other 56% have to complete that requirement by?
Next week, August 1st.
So what's going to happen? Let's be optimistic and let's say 50 out of that 56% do. Tell me what happens to the other 6% who thinks that they're about to go to Dyersburg State or Jackson State, Pellissippi, somewhere. They're about to be enrolled, and all of a sudden they show up and they haven't completed their work, and they think they're about to be able to enroll, and they can't.
That's a great question. Fortunately, and also unfortunately, we have some experience with dropping students. So you had to go to your 2 mandatory meetings. You had to do your FAFSA. If you didn't do that, you lost eligibility for Tennessee Promise. When a student loses eligibility, we email them, and if we have a parent email, we also email them as well. They then immediately call my office, in my experience, all 10,000 of them. What we do then, I'll be really clear, we do not tell that student you're not going to college. We make clear to them the Tennessee Promise isn't an option now. The reality is 51% of our students are full Pell. The Pell Grant was always going to pay for their Tennessee Promise. We immediately ascertain if they are a full Pell student, and we really work with them to continue moving them through the continuum. But there absolutely are going to be students that do not complete their community service, and they'll lose their eligibility.
I'm just thinking back to my days in state legislature. I know there's going to be a lot of state senators, state representatives who get phone calls asking
Yes, sir.
them to intervene on their behalf and asking you to give them some type of waiver. You know, they're going to be asking for some type of treatment, preferential treatment. Just didn't know what the mechanism there was. And I just hope that we're consistent. I don't think it's appropriate that somebody who goes out and does everything they're supposed to do is treated then the same as someone who didn't do what they're supposed to do at the very end. And also we come and wave a wand and say it's okay. As our first year we had growing pains. So I just want us to be consistent throughout the process.
We agree. We have been to this point. We'll continue to be. At this point, we've probably emailed and texted the students over 22 times. Relative, that's a literal number, about 22 times about their community service requirement.
It strikes me that this age group of people typically wait till the very last minute, Mr. Secretary. So there should be a whole lot of community service done this coming week.
I'll be a lot of brand new mistakes. Exactly, yeah.
Following up on what the Secretary asked you, Mike, on the 6% in his example that aren't going to go in the end, are we going to do any kind of focus group or survey or something to find out what happened to those people? I mean, did they come up with the money to go to a 4-year university, or what was the deal, you know? Or are they just not going at all anywhere, you know, and what is the reason for that?
We are. So when you applied the Tennessee Promise, you are now tagged in THEC's SIS, whether you use Promise or not. So that'll help us learn about what happened to the ones that didn't. And also, we're probably at the phase now where we need to retain an external evaluator. In year 1 of Tennessee Promise, our focus really was implementation. We need somebody, some external group to come in and help us look at that story, I think, on a larger scale.
Even if we just send them a text message, being millennials that they are, you know, and say, okay, dude, what happened here? You know, just give me the 2-sentence explanation. You know, that's helpful input in and of itself. So I hope we're gathering that by the best means possible.
Mike, I can't remember. Once you're out forever, or is there an annual reapply?
You are out forever.
Out forever.
Yes, sir. So, and one thing just to make a point, we do not expect that all 31,000 are going to do community service. We think probably 16 to 18,000 would. And I just would remind you, the fiscal note that was written for this bill, we considered success 12,000 students going to college on Tennessee Promise. Right now, we're at almost 14,000. So we're actually in the success zone from here on out. Obviously, though, we want to continue to push community service. And I'd also say we have done 2 statewide opportunities. We opened all the community college campuses on July 11th to come do community service, and we did all of the state parks last Saturday. I knew Tennessee Promise would take me interesting places. I never imagined I would be driving off-road in Henry Horton State Park to go build a bridge to a river. But we did that, so that happened. James?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Deaton, and members of the Commission. So I just wanted to provide a brief update from the functionality side for THEC and the Tennessee Promise program. So as you know, THEC serves as administrative arm. So we're going to be doing the payment side and tracking as we move forward. So the date of enrollment is quickly approaching. So that, as Mike touched on with community service and we do have a verification piece that is built in as well for students that were selected for verification. They do have to provide some documentation to the institution on that piece as well. So we're working through that first cohort of students. We recently implemented some system upgrades that will allow the partnering organizations to be able to electronically verify the mandatory meeting piece and the community service piece. So throughout this first year, we've been exchanging Excel files. So it may have seemed a little antiquated as to passing a list from TSAC to the PO to the partnering organization for giving them back to us and then sending that on to the TCATs or the TBR institutions. So we've now implemented that piece that will allow them to electronically verify, which will then also populate rosters at the institutional level. So that's a huge upgrade for us and for the institution. So we're very excited about that. The system upgrades are also going to give the institutions real-time access to their students. So as a student may change from one institution to another, the institution can then see that student's information on their roster, which is fantastic. And these implementations will also then allow the institutions to request payment for their eligible students moving forward. So last Thursday and Friday, I provided some training. TSAC as our group, so Robert, Tim, and myself provided training to the TCATs and the TBR institutions and the TACU institutions via conference calls on the certification process and just to address programmatic questions they may have had moving, from the last year and then moving forward into certification and on in even to cohort 2. So we did provide that training. I felt like there was success. That was kind of my first piece. It was, I guess, day 7. So just jumping in, hitting the ground running, training as best as we could, from my perspective and from the institution's perspective on the program side. So we're working on some additional system upgrades as we roll out cohort 2. The application opens August 17th. So we're looking forward to that. We're just getting some system upgrades in place, some upgrades to the application and so on. The last thing to just touch on briefly, the outreach team is gearing up. We received the Tennessee Promise push cards, which is kind of our informational piece, I believe yesterday. They came into our warehouse, and so we're going to roll out distribution of those during the month of August to accompany the financial aid brochures. We visit high schools from our outreach team's perspective, and they're starting to do the outreach to the high school counselors, setting up not only our presentations, which are traditional, but Tennessee Promise application events with any schools that may be willing to do those. And so I'll be happy to answer any questions you guys may have as well from maybe a functionality. Thank you all very much for the opportunity.
Next item on the agenda is Dr. Deaton's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, want to echo your comments about the work session. I thought it went really well. A lot of details discussed, a lot of issues really diving in deeply, too, on the master plan, quality assurance, and the formula, and other issues as well. So I thought that went very well. I want to inform the Commission, too, about a month ago, we had a senior staff retreat with the TSAC and THEC senior staff. Chance to get away at Montgomery Bell to talk about our future, to talk about the types of things that we value as an organization, talk about where we're going in the future, how we define ourselves. So a lot of self-reflection at that meeting, which I think produced a lot of starting points for conversations, not being the end of what the meeting was, but starting conversations about where we ought to go as a staff. So that was very productive, and out of that, some new ideas emerged that we'll be talking to you more about in the coming months. So that was a successful retreat. I want to introduce a couple of new full-time staff and ask them to stand. Kelly Overton Right behind you, sir. Kelly is an education and research specialist in the post-secondary authorization division, bachelor's degree in psychology, and a master's in clinical psychology. So, Kelly, thanks. Welcome. And also Kevin Bradley, way in the back there. Kevin just joined us, I think, 2 weeks ago as an analyst in the Adult Learner Initiatives area of PPR, working with Marianne Rainey and Jessica Gibson, Bachelor of Science in History, working toward his master's at Vanderbilt, and is an active member of the National Guard. So, Kevin, thanks for being here and welcome. And also, of course, James introduced earlier, and also want to comment on this being Kim Martin's last meeting. Dr. Kim Martin, who's actually behind behind the equipment there. Dr. Martin has been on the staff for several years in the lottery analysis area of PPR. He's done a lot of great work for us in the research and data enterprise we have, and is going to join the faculty here next month in Georgia at Armstrong State. I always get those smaller schools confused. At Armstrong State. So we will dearly miss Kim and wish she and her family very well in their future endeavors. Yeah. Two more items, Mr. Chairman, and I'll play the MC role on this. I want to ask for two brief presentations on two different items. First, I want to introduce Leah Llewellyn to talk about the McWhorter Scholarship Program, which, as a prelude to the McWhorter reception we'll have this evening at the executive residence. And don't want to steal Leah's thunder, but this is one of the most prestigious scholarships we have. I want to give you some background on it. And tonight we'll be hosting a reception to recognize those students and their excellence. Leah is the Director of Grants and Scholarships for THEC. Leah, the floor is yours.
Morning. Thank you, Dr. Deaton, Chairman, Commission members. I appreciate talk to you guys today about the Ned McWhorter Scholars Program. Just to provide a little background about what we do, my staff and I administer state aid that is state funded, which is essentially those that are not funded by the lottery program. This includes the Tennessee Student Assistance Award, which is TSAA, or our need-based state program, and also the Ned McWhorter Scholars Program. For the 2014-15 academic year, we disbursed almost $65 million to 35,000 students. The Ned McWhorter Scholars Program encourages academically superior Tennessee students to attend school in our state. Students must have a cumulative grade point average of 3.5 and an ACT score of 29 or higher. In addition, these students are graded on their extracurricular activities. So we grade them higher if they take AP and honors classes. They are also given extra merit if they take on a leadership role in these activities. The program is extremely competitive. Just to sort of give you an idea of how competitive, for this upcoming 2015-16 academic year, we had over 1,200 applicants and 48 were selected to receive the award. So that's about 5% of those students who are actually selected and can participate. The grade point average for those 48 students, this might blow you away a little, their grade point average was 3.99 as an average, and their average ACT was a 34. So in addition to those 48 students, we have 152 students who will continue in the program who received it in prior years. Students who participate receive $6,000 per year. $3,000 of that is state funded, and then $3,000 is also a match from the college that they have already signed an agreement to do. For this incoming class of students, they'll attend 11 colleges or universities across Tennessee. Most of those students will actually be attending UT Knoxville and Vanderbilt. Thanks to Dr. Deaton, he mentioned this evening we will hope to start a new tradition in honoring those students with a ceremony at the governor's residence, and we hope that that's something that those students and their families can look forward to. That concludes my remarks. If you guys have any questions about the program. Thank you.
Yeah. Second half of this, I want to ask Jessica Gibson to come to the mic and give you an update on one particular aspect of the suite of adult learner initiatives that we're pursuing, and to make an announcement about some good news we've just received.
Thank you. Good morning. Thanks. So last commission meeting, we hinted at sort of the next frontier in our work with adult learners, namely community-based initiatives. We believe that the success of Tennessee Reconnect efforts in large part lies within the communities. So the communities that really own these goals and that promote and communicate a culture of post-secondary education to their citizens. Now, when we talk about community, a community can be a city, it can be a county, it can be a group of counties. How they define themselves is important. We're not going to put that definition upon them, but we are looking for willing partners. Excuse me. So within the month, we're going to be releasing an RFP to local community representatives such as local chambers, economic development boards, nonprofit organizations, inviting applications to become a Tennessee Reconnect community. So what is this? A Tennessee Reconnect community is a community that brings together partners from local institutions, employers, local government, nonprofit organizations, faith-based organizations to create a center that will provide high-touch services to adults in the community that want to complete a degree. So what do these services look like? So bear with me for a moment. Imagine you're 40, 42 years old. You went to college right out of high school, but you dropped out a year in because your dad got sick and you had to go home and help out at home with the family. You stayed, you got a job, you got married, you had a child, and you didn't get that degree. But now you want it. And you want it because you want to move up in your company, you want to change jobs, or you just want your child to see you do it. But you don't know how. And you don't want to call up the college down the street because you got on their website and you don't know who to ask for when you call at the college. And you don't know what questions to ask. And you don't want to ask questions that might embarrass you. But say you have a Tennessee Reconnect Community Center nearby, or there's one in the county next to you that sends advisors to your workplace or to your church. You now have access to an institution-neutral advisor who can help you choose an institution and a program that fits with your life and your goals. They can help you fill out financial aid forms and file them, help you with study tips, time management, how to balance work, life, and school, and other sorts of seminars and as I mentioned, high-touch services. So we are excited to announce that we have received a grant from the Lumina Foundation to help pay for technical assistance for 8 communities across the state to receive help in setting up these services and delivering them to their citizens. We, for the technical assistance, we'll be partnering with a group called Graduate, the Graduate Network out of Philadelphia. They have pioneered this model in 11 cities across the country, including Memphis, and they're starting work in Nashville right now. We're actually going to be using state money as well. Crystal mentioned yesterday there was $1 million recurring funding. That money is going to be used to help the communities do with startup funds, hiring a director, hiring a lead advisor, rent, overhead costs, etc. We anticipate that 3 communities will roll out by March 2016, with 5 more by December 2016. We anticipate that these will be freestanding centers, organizations, or incubated within existing organizations. We don't anticipate that they will be part of any formal local government structure. This is a collective impact model, so the development of them, the planning of them will require participation from local institutions, from government, from nonprofit organizations, really sectors, multi-sectors. So again, we're very, very excited about this. We're going to be starting our work very soon. Happy to be working with Lumina again. Happy to really embark on working at the community level with communities. So I'm going to pause here. That's what I have, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Chairman, if I could acknowledge and thank Jessica and her staff for, we talked about entrepreneurialism yesterday. This is another manifestation of that. This is an extremely competitive nationwide environment to pursue grants such as this. A lot of states are trying this, and Jessica and her team were able to convince Lumina to fund and seed this grant and this effort. It's an amazing effort, and I thank her and her staff for doing that. It's really in the spirit of us trying to reach out and be entrepreneurial and try to find ways to serve students in innovative ways. So, Jessica and your team, thank you.
Great news. Very good.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Deaton. Next item on the agenda is recognition of institutional excellence. And as the commission knows, this is a new agenda item where we want to highlight some positive things going on our campuses across the state. And this morning, we're honored to have President Karen Bauer from Dyersburg State Community College to speak to us this morning. Thank you.
Morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Deaton, members of the commission. Dr. Deaton and his team visited us, I think, last summer and had a look at what's going on with Scale Builder, and the work has intensified, and just want to talk a little bit about it this morning. As you can see, or maybe you can, it's kind of fine print there, but really what we're trying to do is help people with their basic skills. We have a lot of adults that we were just talking about, plus people who are 17, 18 years old that are still deficient, and even deficient to the point of ACT scores at less than 13, and if they're adults, they take the Compass test, so their Compass scores may be below different levels, and they have different numbers for depending on the skill, writing or reading or mathematics. But the student can come to one of our locations. We're in Covington and Dyersburg and Trenton, and get help in an academic success center. And once they get started, they can do a lot of the work at home, which many of them do. There's free tutoring. A lot of them have no computers at home, so they do need to work with us. A lot of them don't really know how to use a computer, so a lot of technology training goes on, as well as the basic skills. To give you an idea, I know Mike Krause and everyone got things going with Tennessee Promise in the last year, but we started all of this back in 2012. At that time, enrollments were fairly high. We've lost some enrollments since then. But we had resources, and we had people who wanted to work, and we had certainly space for them to use in the summertime. So we decided to open these academic success centers the summer of 2012, and 342 people showed up and took advantage of free tutoring and free help throughout the summer. And about 27% of them were successful, which meant they completed at least one competency in reading or math or writing. And you can see through we did it again the following summer. Then during the break in December, students asked if they could get some help. Maybe they got an incomplete in a course, and they wanted some help in December and early January before we started spring semester. So we started in the winter of 13-14. Of offering services for 3 weeks, again, summer of 14, and we also had the winter sessions this past year, 14-15. So now we're in the summer of 15. So far we have 367 students that are taking advantage of it. 175 of them are Tennessee Promise students. At least 109 have completed one competency, so we're about 30% there. And a total of 1,913 people over these years. So it's an investment we've made. Students don't pay anything, and it is something that on the next slide you can see the cost. The first year was only about $50,000 to pay. Not only $50,000 is a lot of money, but it paid tutors and our staff time to manage these 3 locations. Last summer we spent about $67,000, and not sure what it's going to cost this summer, but kind of get a sense of what happened in the different locations. Number of Tennessee Promise students in the spring. We started calling students who had applied for the Tennessee Promise program that were deficient. In other words, their ACTs were below 18 or 19. And asked them to come in after high school at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon and work on their skills. and about 41 of them did, and we had other students coming in at that time too, anyone that had applied to the college who was deficient. And we are continuing it, of course, in the summer, and 175 Tennessee Promise students, so in total worked with 216 of them. Part below at the bottom there, 367 of the skill builder students are skill builder students, in other words, getting some help out of the total that have enrolled so far of 597, so it's about 62%. And the 175 Tennessee Promise students are getting help, and so far we've enrolled 326 Tennessee Promise students, so that's has any questions, numbers, just stop me. On the visits that students make, it's not just a one-time effort. I think in Dyersburg it shows 870, spending almost 1,000 hours, and so on. Covington, 454 visits by students, and so in total, all three locations, about 1,500 visits and 367 different students. And the circle graphs at the bottom just showing the percentage at each place of hours and visits. The next chart shows again visits, hours, numbers of students. It's kind of interesting at the bottom, the averages per student. In Dyersburg, they made 5.3 visits and spent about 6 hours. Remember, they can, once they visit a center, they might get started and work at home. Same thing at the Jimmy Nafee Center, only 2.9 visits and only 5.54 hours. And at the Gibson County Center in Trenton, 5 visits, but 11.67 hours. And I spent a little time in the Gibson County Center yesterday just talking to the students that were in there working. And all of you have a map of our principal service area. And if you look at Gibson County, at their poverty level, median household income, it's $38,343. In Dyer County, median is about the same, $38,953. If you go down to Tipton County, the median household income at $52,423. So yesterday, the people I was talking with did not have computers at home. Income levels are much lower in Gibson County than they are in Tipton, so that may explain the fact that they need to spend a lot of time at our place in order to get the help that they need. I have a copy, more information, and this is kind of interesting. We do look at this, the times a day that people check in. On Mondays, only 3 checked in at 8 o'clock in Dyersburg so far this summer. They may have stayed several hours, but that was a check-in time, and so on down the line. We stayed open until 4:30. We are open every other Saturday. We do have students at work and just can't come in during the work week. And we're open, I think, a little bit later, certainly in the spring and fall for students that work. So that's looking at Dyersburg, and this is at Jimmy Nafee Center in Covington. Again, just when they're coming in, trying to decide how we can get the best use of our staff time by analyzing this data. And in Trenton, a smaller center, we only have that open. It was open Monday through Thursday, I think, in June. In July, just Monday through Wednesday. So it's a little bit smaller operation. And just to give you a sense of what these students look like and some of our tutors, real quickly, a few slides. Motivation's a big part of it, having a lot of help with writing, getting groups to work together, interacting with this software. My math test software has been very helpful for these students. And the videos, spelling is still a big item, even though our computers do it for us sometimes, but and getting them working on skills at the computer. I know one of the summer Tennessee Promise students was so impressed with our math professor. He said, if I'd had a math teacher like that in high school, I wouldn't have any problems. So we try to have a lot of human interaction with them, but there's also an awful lot of computer interaction too. And reading circles, getting them into books, and groups working together on that. And then just one-on-one tutoring with an expert. And we try to celebrate everybody that gets through a competency. They get a gold star, the date they did it. So Kayla finished the 4th competency in math, which means she has only one more to go, I guess, on the 14th of July. And we don't begin until August 24th, so we hope that she is into college algebra or some other math course and not a developmental course or a learning support course. Are there any questions? Can I give you a yes?
President Bowyer, it's impressive what you've done here, but I have one question for you about your matrix about success rates. What's different about the cohort that came to you in the winter of 13 and 14? Their success rate was 60%.
They had already, most of them had already been in a fall class, and maybe they only had one competency to go. So they just came in to finish it up in that break.
But it didn't happen the next year, did it? With fall students coming in the winter?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it didn't. I didn't notice that particular statistic, so I'm not sure. Have you ever been a classroom teacher? You get some lemons some years, so maybe we have a lemon group.
I certainly have. I've been one of those lemons. Language skills, language arts.
If I can, President, when you calculate the cost, tell me what all is loaded into that?
It's mainly just the staff time, so it's the tutors, and we do hire some of our faculty and give them summer salary, so calculating all of that. And it's only, a partial summer salary. It's not a full salary for them.
On a Saturday, you said in Dyersburg you do every other Saturday.
Right.
Tell me what kind of staffing pattern you would have on that Saturday.
They would probably have at least 3 tutors, and usually we have people that feel very comfortable in one of the disciplines, math, or the reading, or the writing, and then someone there to coordinate it. So we would be open, and they've been fairly busy, I think, on the Saturdays. So I think all the deadlines, all the publicity with Tennessee Promise has spilled over and affected a lot of things, not just the immediate high school senior, but back in 12, we had a lot of interest too. I mean, and you look at our service area, there's just a huge need. It's a very poor area, a lot of unemployment, and a lot of people who need to benefit and can benefit from post-secondary education. So appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Morgan, would you like to deliver your system report?
Sure, I'd probably be well advised just to say that was my system report and let it go. But I frequently don't take good advice, even when I give it to myself. So I'll share just a few things very quickly with you that are going on in our system. First of all, I hope you noticed at least that Austin Peay was once again for the 4th consecutive year named a great college to work for, one of 86 in the country, the only institution, public or private, in Tennessee. So Dr. White, who was here yesterday, could not be here today, was breathing a sigh of relief, because had they not made the 4th consecutive year, she would have had to accept some responsibility for that. But that it's a big deal. In fact, they scored high enough to be on what they call the honor roll, which only included 10 of the large universities, largely measured as 10,000 students or greater, across the country. So that is significant, and they should be congratulated. This month, we have seen 2 new presidents come into our system. Dr. Tracy Hall is at Southwest Tennessee Community College, comes from St. Louis Community College, was a vice president for academic affairs there. And believe that she will do an excellent job in Memphis at Southwest. Is beginning to, has already, frankly, before she got here, hit the ground. I think we will see a lot of activity going forward with Southwest to build on what they have done in the past, but really to become even more of a kind of the central focus of the workforce development in Shelby County and that region. We're very happy to have her with us. Chattanooga State, Dr. Flora Tidings, who was formerly president of the Athens Technical College in Athens, Georgia, is also now on the job. One of the things that Dr. Tidings had been thinking about as she was moving to Chattanooga was talking with the security folks there on campus about doing a live shooter drill. Well, as it turned out, she didn't have to do a drill because of the circumstances in Chattanooga. The tragic, no doubt, was a tragic outcome of that event. The good news for us, at least selfishly, is that at Chattanooga State, things worked well. The shooter was in proximity, not on the campus, but very close to the campus. And John, you understand this. But the campus did go into lockdown. People paid attention. Things worked the way they were supposed to work. The security folks on campus did a great job in coordinating with the Chattanooga Police Department. So from that standpoint, it was a very eventful first week for Dr. Tidings, but learned a great deal about the campus and the way things will operate there. We're very glad to have her. She will also do a great job. And then beginning next week, we'll have a new president at Motlow, Anthony Kinkle, who was formerly president of the Wichita Area Technical College, has been a community college president on 3 occasions and was director of the Maryland Community College system for back several years ago, is coming to Motlow and will be an excellent addition as well to our team. First time since I have been chancellor, we don't have a presidential search underway, and let's keep it that way for all those within the sound of my voice. We do have a TCAT director vacancy at Jacksboro that we are currently filling, so there still is a vacancy in the system, but the presidents are fully staffed now. Mike mentioned Reconnect, and the TCATs have been quite excited about that, and there's been a lot of activity, as he noted. Interestingly, the 11,000 or so applicants that are kind of still in the game for Tennessee Reconnect, substantial portion of them are LPN, interested in LPN programs. It's great that they're interested, and we'll try to hook them into opportunities. TCATs. Difficulty for us is that that's kind of the one area where we don't have a lot of flexibility to accept new students, and that's limited primarily by clinical placement opportunities, and that is a struggle for us statewide in all of our nursing programs, LPN and otherwise. But also a lot of interest in information technology, which is an area that statewide, particularly statewide, is an area where there's a lot of need for credentialed workers in information technology fields, and also business administration technology is another one of those areas that has had a lot of interest. That's interesting because those programs had not been growing pretty much across the state, but this opportunity for Reconnect have caused a lot of folks who otherwise would not have been looking at that program to think, well, this is what could really help me get a better position or do better in the job I'm in. So we're very excited about that. As Mike said, I think we're thinking somewhere 2,000 to 3,000 folks will probably end up enrolling through Reconnect. Of the 11,000 who still applied, but we just don't know yet. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. And on Tennessee Promise, there's also kind of a wait and see phenomenon. We have a lot of interest, as Mike said, 44% now I think was the number he used of folks have finished their service. And frankly, we know a lot of the 31,000 or so students that have remained eligible for Tennessee Promise had other plans. I mean, they had planned on going to a 4-year institution. they signed up for Tennessee Promise. They did the things that you needed to do, but it was kind of a backup plan for them. Well, for those students, Mr. Secretary, we would not be surprised that they're still going to go to their university or going wherever they were going to go, so they might not complete the service requirements. But nevertheless, we are running ahead of projections. As Mike said, we were expecting maybe 12 to 13, 14,000 students to really present this fall as Tennessee Promise students. That number is likely to be considerably larger than that, and that's a good problem. That's a good problem for us to have, and we look forward to having those students there. There is a little difficulty, and I would as you think about Tennessee Promise students, we tend to think about and talk about Tennessee Promise students as that group of students that otherwise would not be taking advantage of post-secondary education opportunities. And clearly, we believe that there will be a number of students who come to us in the fall that will be students that would not be there but for the program. A few of those students, maybe as many as 1 out of 4 of those students, come to our community colleges or TCATs, would have been expected to enroll in a 4-year school, potentially. Those are the numbers that UT had kind of generated when fiscal analysis. But a lot of our first-time full-time freshmen on our campuses will be in the Tennessee Promise program. So the fact that they're in Tennessee Promise program doesn't necessarily tell you much about their academic preparedness, whether they would have been there anyway. So we will try to figure out. Chris Tingle, our guru, is here with us. Over time, we'll try to figure out, kind of who are those students that we're seeing because of Tennessee Promise, how well are they doing, what are the things that we need to be doing better to make sure that the promise is fulfilled in terms of student success. But just the term Tennessee Promise student will encompass, will look a lot like our freshman classes at our community colleges and as they have looked in the past. Real quickly, 2 other things I'll mention to you about this fall. Tennessee Promise, of course, is capturing an awful lot of attention and energy, but we're also moving to scale up some strategies across our system that we know will work. One of those is moving toward co-requisite learning support as opposed to prerequisite learning support. In the old model, for those students who come in and score either on Compass or on ACT at levels that suggest a deficiency, the old model would have been that we'll sign you up for remedial or developmental courses. If you finish those courses, then we will let you take a credit-bearing course in that subject matter. The problem with that is that we weren't very successful with that. For students in math, for example, who needed learning support, maybe 12% of the students who started out in the prerequisite developmental or remedial math course would finish the gateway, the credit-bearing math course within the first year, 12%. Moving to a co-requisite model, which means, and it varies from institution to institution, is exactly how we're doing this, but basically means that you sign up for the credit-bearing course. You're in the real course, but you may also be signed up for a supplemental instruction course. That may be through lab, may be through tutoring, may be through a classroom lecture course, taught or not taught by the same teacher that's teaching the credit-bearing course. The pilots we have done this past year in fall and spring semesters suggest that the 12% number becomes something closer to 65%. Substantial increase, a 5-fold increase in terms of student success, measured by finishing or by completing the gateway credit-bearing course within that year. For language arts, composition is another problematic area. For language arts, the numbers go, Chris, from 23% to 75% or something like that. Again, the co-requisite idea of the student being in the credit-bearing course at the same time they're getting the support they need is one of those things that, as Dennis says, you don't see silver bullets, but you do see silver buckshot. It's one of several things that we can do that potentially really move the needle. The other thing we're doing this fall at scale is having all of our students in an area of academic focus. The idea of the undeclared major is now in our rearview mirror for the most part, and then nothing is absolutely true at every place across our system, but for the most part, every student who enrolls this fall will be either in a specific program, will have a major, or will be in an area of academic focus that can then help us guide them into the courses they need to deliver a degree map to them to really out what it takes for them to finish on time. So those are two things we're doing at scale. That has always been the challenge, is we find things that work in pilot settings, but how you move those things across multiple institutions across our system has been difficult, and we think we will do that successfully. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions?
I couldn't help but notice that it seemed like, at least I think I noticed, that you hired all your presidents from out of state. And I have very limited experience in, the area that you have, et cetera, but I wondered whether or not the pool of applicants that you're seeing for these positions is robust enough in some cases. I know in a very limited experience, perhaps we didn't have that, to give you the kind of choices you feel you need to get the excellence that you're looking for.
Yeah, it's a great question, and in fact, in all three of these searches, for the first time, we used a search firm for two of those searches, for Chattanooga and Memphis. Given the size of those institutions, the markets they're in, we thought that might be a useful tool to use to make sure we were getting as robust a pool of candidates as we could. And we had actually had excellent in-state candidates as well as out-of-state candidates. But in both of those instances, we had in excess of 70 applicants, most of whom were met the qualifications and were actually folks that could have been interviewed and potentially selected. So it was a very difficult process to get down to a group of finalists and into a selection. We did not use a search firm at Motlow, but there we had in excess of 50 applications, several from in-state, several from out-of-state. Again, a very good, high-quality pool. And it's cyclical. I mean, for some reason, this time we end up with three from out-of-state. But in the past, Pellissippi, Roane State, Ball State, the presidents ultimately selected there were all from Tennessee, from institutions within Tennessee. But the search process went very well, and we feel very good about the results.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. It's a privilege to be here with you today. Summer at the University of Tennessee has been very busy. Many times it's slower than this, but it's been busier than usual. We had our board meeting last month in June, the last week of the month. We were pleased to have the board approve the lowest tuition increase across our system at our undergraduate campuses in 30 years at 3%. Very pleased with that. That's just one of the first steps in trying to deal with our business model and make sure that our financial future is secure for the next 10 years. We have estimated, while we've had a great year this year from the standpoint of the appropriations that the state's provided, and we're very appreciative of those, we're not sure the state can hold up that appropriation over the long haul over the next 10. I've been in Tennessee nearly 10 years now. This past year's budget appropriations was the second best I'd seen in that 10-year time frame. But there were a lot of struggles, obviously, after the reality of the recession that occurred in 7 and 8, into 8. And, I think you've heard me speak before. We're going to try to figure out, we own this problem, we're going to try to figure out how to fix it. And the first step was keeping tuition at a reasonable level from the standpoint of increases in order to keep affordability where it needs to be. We have projected, if you look at the modeling we've done, if you keep tuition at whatever the higher education price index is for the prior year, inflationary costs on other operating expenses runs at 3%, and if the state appropriations just stay even, they don't go down, we will have a gap in 10 years of $377 million. We currently have asked our chancellors and our vice presidents who run like IPS and other units to look at a model like that and figure out how to be more entrepreneurial and raise revenue, how to be more effective and efficient and cut expenses and costs in order to close that gap over the time frame. So we're in the middle of doing that. The board is very engaged in it, and they're appreciative of the efforts of our chancellors and our system administration in trying to tackle this problem. Our chancellors are putting together the next 2 budget cycles. We're committed to that in this kind of a model, and we'll see how it works out. And there'll be more details throughout the upcoming year that we'll be sharing at these meetings as well as with our Board of Trustees. In tandem with that effort to look at our business model and correct our financial reality for the future and secure our future, we've also revised the strategic plan that we developed in the first year I had the privilege to serve in this job in 2011. The refresh that we're calling it a refresh, it reflects initiatives related to the business model. We're currently implementing these new initiatives. They include information and data management, as you might expect, communications and marketing, research and industry partnerships, raising awareness of UT's statewide presence and impact, and following the employer choice model practices. You know, part of that planning process was to put in place metrics that we could measure on whether we were achieving the plan over the last 3-year time frame. And we set goals at the conclusion of the planning process that we were going to look at ourselves at the end of this past fiscal year, with the books closing out on the 30th of June. There were 18 objective metrics within that goal set. Of the 18, 10 of them we exceeded goal. 5 of them were in the 90% range of goal, and 3 of them were in the mid to high 80s. The 3 in the 80s, I don't like being in the 80s. They're largely research metrics that we were setting goals for that I felt they were a little bit of a stretch, but they became more of a stretch because federal funding around research programs has shrunk. So we're sending in just as many grant requests, but we don't have a success rate like we used to. And so we will have to look at that goal moving forward and figure out really in the research arena, particularly for Knoxville and the Health Science Center in Memphis and the Institute of Agriculture, our 3 major research enterprises, what we do to secure our future. Because I think it's largely going to have to revolve around saying USDA, National Science Foundation, NIH aren't going to be the cash cow that they were in the past, and we're likely to have greater partnerships with businesses and companies and private sector enterprises and other foundations in order to secure our research program. The other set of goals where we exceeded goal, there was one I've got to tell you about because it's impressive. So, you know, in the first year I was in this job, we were able to secure the approval of the legislature and the governor, obviously, to develop a new foundation. And the foundation's goal was to eventually become independent so that we raise money in gifts from our friends and supporters that do not cost the academic units anything eventually, be an independent foundation. And our goal was by 2020 we would, steady state, be raising $200 million a year. Last year, when we concluded the books this past month, we raised $303 million. The prior year we raised $179 million, and so we're way above that goal. I think if you look at the statistic on the metrics I was talking about, we're like at 230% of goal. Now, and in tandem with all this, we just hired in a new vice president and president of our foundation, and you know our goal was I want you to raise 15% year on year with a 5-year rolling average. Ricky came on board, I don't know, it was like 1st of May, and this happens, and he was in my office last week going, I'm sweating this, Joe, because I don't know how we're going to keep it up. And there is some yin and yang in this because, you know, the reality is we had 2 major gifts last year of about $85 million total, but we're very pleased that we've exceeded that goal. Whether we can be at, $345 million next year, I'm not sure, but we'll swing a bat at it. I think if you look at other things that came out of the board meeting, we honor the life and legacy of Dr. Ed Bowling, who passed away the few days before the board meeting. He was a true champion for this institution. He served the institution as president 18 years, which, Keith, is hard for me to fathom. I've been doing it 5. But Deb reminded me, my wife reminded me that, I've been in administrative appointments now about 17 years if you count the time as dean. So, he just came on board earlier in this job in his career than I did, I think. But nevertheless, it was a notable event to recognize him and have his family at the board meeting, and we really appreciate everything he did for the institution and, of course, the state. The board elected a new board vice chairman, Raja Jabran from Knoxville. They also approved the strategic plan from the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, presented by Chancellor Angle. They approved the long-range master plan for the UT Health Science Center, which you'll hear more about, I guess, later in the meeting because this body will be asked to approve it. And we have a number of positions we'll be searching for. In fact, I chuckled to myself when John said all of his presidents are taken care of, because when I became a dean, I'll never forget it, I thought first or second year at that institution, if I just get all these positions filled, life will really be good. But the reality is people are always moving on. I mean, universities are training grounds from the first day undergraduate to the presidency. And so it's normal to have turnover. So we've got an interim chancellor at UT Martin, Robert Smith, who was he wasn't provost there. He was a dean of liberal arts and science, but was provost and then president at Slippery Rock University in the Pennsylvania system. He comes to Martin with considerable experience around enrollment management and dealing with enrollment issues that he had at Slippery Rock. He's a good fit because he understands Weakley County and the community. He's agreed to serve for a year. We will hope to honor that, and we'll be starting a search in order to honor his ability to serve just 1 year, hopefully. We also have a search starting in the Institute of Public Service for a vice president there. Mary Jenks retired a couple of years ago. Herb Bird is an interim appointee, and we will be doing an internal search for that job. On the Martin job, we will, for that position as chancellor at UT Martin, we will be doing a national search. And the other person who's leaving is in the room. Butch Pekalo indicated his intention to retire in January, and we will honor that request and be working through a search process and organizational structure around his office and the rest of the team in order to do that. Lastly, I would tell you that at this point, enrollment projections for us are very good at Knoxville, which is typical. I mean, I think Knoxville will probably come in with 400 or 500 additional students this year over last year, and last year's class was one of the biggest they've ever had in recent history. And, I think Chattanooga, their enrollment predictions are that they'll stay about where they were last year and they won't have any decline. Martin has struggled, and, if we look at the presentation from Dyersburg State and these incomes, it's a lot of Martin's problem, too, from the standpoint of the financial reality of the families that send students that go to UT Martin. We know that about 65% of entering classes Pell eligible when they come to Martin. That Promise has impacted their enrollment management to a certain extent. And as I mentioned at the workshop yesterday, getting relief for them from the standpoint of securing out-of-state students in Kentucky, Illinois, Southern Illinois, and Missouri at in-state rates would be helpful, I think, to them, because enrollment is real money that you operate the place on. If you lose 400 students, which is what happened last year at Martin, it's about a $2.5 million reduction in revenue to the institution. Their total budget's in the 130s, 130 million. So it's like a 1.5% cut in income or revenue for them to operate on. So we have to secure their future. And the other benefit of out-of-state students is, as I said yesterday, depending on what document you read on the national level, some 50 to 60% of the students who come as out-of-state students stay in the state they trained in, which benefits the workforce here. So that concludes my remarks. Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Very much, Dr. D.P. next phase of our meeting, we'll turn to our action items. The first item on the agenda is election of officers for the next year, and I'll recognize Dr. Tatum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The officers for the next year and working with you to identify the right slate. Evan continuing as chairman, vice chairs, Keith Wilson, David Kustoff, Secretary Mayor A.C. Wharton. Provision of the THEC policy is that the three officers, the two vice chairs, and the chairman come from each of the three grand divisions of the state. So that limits the options quite a bit. So that is the slate that is in the agenda item.
Unless there's an objection, I'll entertain a motion for adoption of that slate. Have a motion. We have a second. Have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we come to the consent agenda portion of our agenda. As I've mentioned before, these items obviously were discussed in detail at the workshop. There was not a commissioner who asked to pull any item off, so at this point, I'll entertain a motion for adoption of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Have a motion. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Martin. All in favor signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have three items in a row, items D, E, and F on your agenda. Staff has recommended that we vote on those items as in one vote, and unless there's an objection, that's the way I intend to proceed. Is that okay with everyone? So at this point in time, what I'm referring to, for those of you who don't have an agenda, would be approval of the 2015 to 25 master plan, the 2015 to 2020 quality assurance funding, and obviously the outcomes-based formula. So with that, I'll call on David Wright for the master plan presentation.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Deaton, members of the commission, and honored guests. As we discussed yesterday, the master plan is a statutory responsibility of the commission. We've typically done it every 5 years, and as you might imagine, it's a collaborative effort of a lot of people. So I wanted to thank, as I did yesterday, John Morgan and Joe DiPietro and Claude Presnell, all who appear to have stepped out, but for making the people under their system or sector leadership available to this process, members of our own commission. Robert Fisher, who's no longer on the commission, but as our student member, and visited with everyone on the committee at length individually, and we met several times as a group, attended meetings of the Articulation and Transfer Council, the Funding Formula Review Committee, and visit with our staff that's in charge of various initiatives. So a lot of input, a lot of discussions went behind before we started writing, and then I really felt I've worked on plans in other states and one plan here, and I really felt this time around in Tennessee that really what I was doing was describing or giving some coherence to a lot of things that are already going on or starting or in the works, and really felt like this was, in some ways, we had such a good running start that I feel very good about this plan and the fact that we're already doing a lot of things we need to be doing. So I did want to recognize a couple of people individually. One is Dennis Jones, who is here. He's the president of the National Center for Higher Education Management Systems in Boulder, Colorado, and a good friend of the commission's, and we've engaged his firm several times, and he and his staff have done things like developing online tools for us to help with planning, and just Dennis carries so much experience and national perspective. We sort of put him on the staff temporarily to help us help guide this effort. And also Alex Gorbanoff, are you here? Yeah, there he is. I wanted to recognize Alex and also Emily House, under whom Alex works, for doing a lot of the calculations work that is in the plan and that you'll see a couple of slides on in a moment. It was an iterative process, shall we say, Alex, but I think we ended up at a good place in terms of calculating the gap between where we need to be and where we are at the moment. So with that, go ahead and get in. As I mentioned, this is a statutory responsibility of the commission. In the past, we've done it every 5 years. This time around, we decided to adopt a 10-year planning window, somewhat for rhetorical purposes, but I think it is also correct in that the 2025 is sort of the due date, if you will, that the governor has given us for achievement of the Drive to 55 goal, which stated, in case someone's here and doesn't quite know what that is that by 2025, 55% of our working age adult population, ages 25 to 64, will hold a college degree or other post-secondary credential of labor market value. That would be certificates and diplomas and potentially other things. We got into discussion of that, but I don't think we're quite to the point where we want to begin including things that aren't in the categories I mentioned just yet. We had a bit of a discussion yesterday. I think Mr. Wilson sort of brought it up, and this is a plan in that it is a more in terms of being a policy agenda setting document than it in a signaling document than it is what you might have seen in business, or if you're working for a governing board, an operational or strategic plan with goals, objectives, tasks, due dates, and all that kind of thing. But I think it does assist the systems in developing their own strategic plans, and then the institutions that develop plans from that. I think of it as a table-setting document in a lot of ways. And that 10-year period, this was strictly just an editorial choice on my part. I try to use a little something to help distinguish one plan from another, calling this this 10-year period the decade of decision, because it is the time period in which we will or will not achieve the Drive to 55. Most of the documents such as this that I've worked on, there's a goal somewhere out there in the future by which, I might be retired that the state is supposed to do something, but there's real accountability built into this document, because at the end of the 10-year window, we'll know whether or not we've achieved the Drive to 55. Most of the interest and discussion yesterday was on the 35 or so observations and recommendations at the conclusion of the document, but just sort of as an orienting exercise, I thought I'd lay out for you the other sections that lead into that without going into gory detail on all of that. First of all, I just start by talking about some of our key accomplishments to date. It's important to realize we're not starting from a standing stop. We're sort of on a continuum of good things that have been going on and will continue, I'm sure, to go on, whether this plan was in existence or not. But it gives voice and coherence to some of those things, I believe. And then the second section has to do with how are we going to organize the work ahead, and the Drive to 55 it's what's in the water in Tennessee, and that's sort of how we're going to, the framework within which we're going to go forward. Two of the big questions about the Drive to 55 is how many awards are we talking about exactly? And the second question, which I call adequacy, and the second question has to do with, well, okay, so what purpose would these awards be for? Where do they need to be? Who needs to get them in what occupations, what industries, and at what degree level? And so call that alignment. So there's a discussion of that, and I wanted to get into a couple of data displays about that in a minute. We also then lay out the case for the 3 focus populations that were adopted by the Funding Formula Review Committee as worthy of special focus. The special focus in terms of the funding formula is in the form of a premium that's paid for institutions that have one of these students achieve an outcome, earning a degree or an award. As Russ Deaton's example is, if 100 adult learners graduated from a certain institution in a year, it would act like, under the old formula, it would be counted as 140 people. There was a 40% premium applied. They actually increased that premium this year, but that's what I mean when I say a premium. The formula actually amplifies the weight of students from these focus populations. For purposes of this plan, we're continuing with the 2 from last cycle, adult learners and low-income students, which we operationally define as students that were Pell Grant eligible at any point in their post-secondary career. So it becomes an attribute, not a year by year, you were and you weren't eligible. if a student was eligible at any time, we just assigned that to them as an attribute. And then the new population this year is academically underprepared students. The rationale for these focus populations is that they are at typically at greater risk of not completing, and so institutions that are able to see those students through to completion receive extra credit, if you would, for graduating those folks. This is not to say these are the only populations of students that we need to be concerned about. Indeed, the Drive to 55 is for all Tennesseans, including students that were already enrolling, but as a student flow model tool that Dennis's folks developed for us pointed out very clearly, we won't get to the Drive to 55 just by doing a better job of serving the kinds of students that are already coming to higher education, even if we achieved 100% efficiency in terms of getting those students into, through, and out of higher education. So with the framework in place, I elucidate a few of the available tools and strategies that are available to us. First of all is the Drive to 55 agenda itself with its big component pieces of Promise, Reconnect, and LEAP. The Complete College Tennessee Act of 2010 is still a relevant and salient agenda for higher education. In fact, 5 years later from the date it was passed, many of the things that were new then are just part of the culture here in Tennessee. Tennessee transfer pathways that ease the articulation and transfer of students who go from a 2-year to a 4-year school, and has given rise actually now to something called reverse transfer that allows students to get an associate degree after they've transferred to the 4-year, provided they've met certain conditions. And my time must have hit that, I'm sorry. And then there were steps made in the CCTA to align finance mechanisms with post-secondary policy goals, mainly at that time through the outcomes formula and the what is now known as the Quality Assurance Funding Program. So we build on that idea a bit. Outreach of the kind that Jessica Gibson talked about today and Kate Derrick talked about yesterday, to our P16 through P16 linkages and linkages through communities to adult learners. The connecting theme, which Jessica also talked about this morning, is building capacity in local communities in order to achieve sort of a culture of college access and success, rather than thinking about interventions with these populations as extra or something nice to do but not mission critical. And so we are thinking around outreach has evolved. I think it's important also to point out that that the Drive to 55 is a college completion agenda, but before that can happen, it also has to be an access agenda. You have to get students in before you can get them out. And so there is an access component to the Drive to 55. In fact, you might think of the gap between where we are going to be in 2025 if we do nothing and where we need to be. You might think of that gap as represented by our success with these focal populations, adults, first-generation students, veterans, and the like, and the low-income and academically underprepared students as well. And then lastly, we have in this state, fortunately, a culture of evaluation for institutional and system improvement, as well as accountability. That started back in the 70s with the performance funding program and sort of imbued itself through in individual institutions. And so when we went to the outcomes-based formula 5 years ago, there was already a lot of groundwork laid. People were, I wouldn't say they were comfortable with the idea, but there was a lot of, it wasn't something so radically different that it just was dead on arrival. So we're going to continue this ongoing evaluation for accountability and improvement through quality assurance funding and through annual master plan progress report that will, both of those will have qualitative as well as quantitative elements. I spoke earlier about adequacy. I wanted to give you an idea of what we mean. Some of the numbers on this chart come from previous analysis, but I'll just focus your attention on the 1,978,000. That is the calculation of the number of credentialed individuals we'll need in 2025. Fortunately, we already have about half of those. When you then look at the number next to the last row, number of credentials needed to meet the Drive to 55 goal, I'm sorry, I might have misspoke. The 1,900,000 is the number of credentialed individuals that will be needed. And once you subtract out, I'm going to make sure I say this right before I say it. Once you subtract out the students who, in the blue row, are credentialed now, the citizens that are credentialed now and won't age out, won't become non-working age population by 2025, add that to our current stock of credentials awarded in 2014, subtract that from the 1.9, you're left with, as he waves his hands, 871,000. That's the number of credentials we'll need to produce anew between now and 2025. A lot of that will occur through natural growth, which I can explain. And so it means annually we're looking at about 79,000 new, about 79,000 degrees to get to 871. That's the total lift. But what I wanted to show you is that if you look at the tan solid line amongst all these lines, it's the one that ends in 793,000. We're on a path to produce the majority of these degrees through current efforts. Natural growth just means we looked at past growth trends by sector and award level, and we looked then at some other intervening factors such as high school, the population of high school graduates, some other economic indicators, and adjusted that the trend line from the past to the present. And so we're projecting we'll be at 793,000 by 2025. So the gap between what the Drive to 55 needs, the 871,000, and the natural growth is that's what the Drive to 55 initiatives need to fill. So by the end of 2025, we'll be looking at a need to produce new about 77,000 or so graduates. Long story short, that ends up coming to about an annual growth rate of 1.15%. So all that to say, the goal of Drive to 55 is aspirational, but it's achievable. It's not like we're talking about something that is more of a pipe dream. I think it's very achievable. So anyway, that is numerically where we want to go. Adequacy, we talk about. We need to define terms better, so there's a lot of new things on the horizon. Digital badges, not some things that aren't new, but we have not counted in the past would be industry certifications, apprenticeships. There's a lot of credentials out there that we're not counting for various reasons. Some have to do with there's not surety or consensus about whether the labor market, the extent to which it values those credentials over and above the ones we're already counting. Some of the things, it's like, well, where would we get the data? But these are things we need to consider in the near future. So we need better definition of terms about what we will and won't include in the Drive to 55. Cumulative gap of about 79,000 awards by 2025. And the majority of this new growth will come from adults. We posit 2/3 of the new growth will come from adults, 1/3 from traditional age students. And the growth pattern is predicated on some presumed sector shifts. We see the community colleges and TCATs benefiting somewhat from Promise and some of the other things that are going on policy-wise, and the institutions that are authorized by our Division of Post-Secondary Schools taking the enrollment hit. There's already been several school closings. There's a federal regulatory environment that has affected growth in some of those schools. So we see them decreasing from a high of a few years ago, and the community colleges and TCATs increasing, and we presume no change in terms of the sector share in public and private universities. Alignment is really as much about communicating as it is about calculating, communicating between agencies of what everyone's doing, communicating with students and their families. We can't presume that because we know where job growth is that our next door, children of our next door neighbors know that. And so we need to do some better communicating around that. That is a big lift that needs to be coordinated. It's something that THEC doesn't, really do particularly well, so it needs to be a shared effort. I think it would be helpful to have some sort of a hot list of the growth jobs in terms of raw numbers and in terms of supply-demand ratio that people can organize activities around, whether it's academic degree program planning or at the local level devising strategies around supplying certain occupations. We do have a statement in there affirming the value of liberal arts to the Drive to 55. I think it's important that we not devalue that when we're talking about occupational growth. And the alignment efforts, really, there is an entity needed to oversee all this alignment. There are several different groups that are working on different parts of the agenda. So we see the Governor's Workforce Subcabinet as a group that could continue to meet and help guide our alignment efforts. Articulation and transfer, there are a lot of good things in place, but we need to have ongoing vigilance about our dual admission agreements. That was a part of the CCTA that we need to make sure is working well, who has agreements with whom, and are they actually being effective, and how could they become more effective. The Articulation and Transfer Council has important roles to play in terms of making sure the Tennessee transfer pathways are leak-proof and well articulated, as well as continue to oversee the burgeoning reverse transfer effort. Finance policy, our outcomes formula is clicking right along. There are several recommendations for improvement there that we came to in concert with that committee. The capital process needs to be looked at, and in fact has been and is being looked at, and make that more aligned with state policy goals. There's a need for a holistic look at all of this, not just appropriations, not just tuition and aid, not just capital, but all the sources of revenue, local, federal, and sort of put all that in a package and discuss, well, who's going to pay for what in terms of the Drive to 55 agenda. And so we recommend an initial and then an annual funding summit. I don't know, it's probably not the right word, but regularly scheduled conversations about how are we doing in terms of funding the Drive to 55. That would involve all the right people at the table: legislative, gubernatorial, system staff, THEC. In terms of the observations and recommendations, outreach, we, THEC, need to provide some actionable local data to communities about what would this mean in your county, how many more high school graduates, what's their participation rate need to be, continuation rate and graduation rate. As I said earlier, localized strategies around adult learners particularly are essential. There's an effort underway right now to focus on the low-hanging fruit, the adults that have over half the credits for a degree but no credential. That'll begin this fall. And then the ALFE process, it's a process that's overseen by CALE, the Council for Adult and Experiential Learning. ALFE stands for an Adult Learner Friendly Institution, and several of our institutions have done self-studies. Basically, if we're going to reach out to adults in a new way, in a coordinated way, the institutions need to be able to understand where they are and aren't ready to handle those students when they show up on campus. We say a few things about online education, basically bringing all those disparate online resources together under one roof, one consumer-facing web environment. We need to continue to explore ways to increase the responsible use of competency-based education, and that's currently going on in terms of looking at a competency-based path into the AAS degree and out of the AAS degree, so that's a good start there. Prior learning assessment is underway, and Jessica and former staff member Wilson Finch headed up a group a couple of years ago that really took Tennessee to the head of the pack in terms of having a well-articulated set of PLA cutoffs and strategies, and her staff continues to work with institutions on implementing that. We're also going to put PLA into the funding formula beginning next funding cycle to recognize it's important. And then again, the evaluation for accountability and improvement. I think the important part there is it's not just a quantitative exercise, but a qualitative follow-up on this plan every year to say, here are all the things that we said needed to happen, and here's where we are on each one, as well as the quantitative when you're looking at filling that degree gap. Where are we by sector and by award level and by special focus population, et cetera. So that, in as quickly as I could do it, was a summary of the 40 pages or so that we have in terms of the master plan. Again, I want to thank oversight from the commission and participation from everyone that was involved. With that, I'll be quiet and listen to take questions.
Questions for David? David, thanks.
Okay.
Next call on Victoria Harpool.
Dr. Deaton. So I'll give a brief look at what's going on with quality assurance funding, and this is the one of the pieces that complements what's going on with the funding formula as far as getting in touch with campuses, making sure that standards stay high, that rigor stays high, and that students really get what they're paying for in going to these campuses. So we go through this process every 5 years and take a look at what the standards are. There are several review committees that were involved, including with the THEC staff. We looked at about 50 individuals providing their expertise and their feedback, examining the standards and really digging into them and making sure that we were providing the best recommendations for campuses as they engage with these standards. And so this was our advisory committee. It ranged from members from the system staff, university and community college presidents, chancellors, as well as members of the faculty were also highly engaged in the process. So this is our standards. You'll see they're broken down into two broad categories: the student learning and engagement, which makes up 75%, and then student access and success. General education and major field assessment are two of our hallmark standards. They've been around for a number of years and will continue to be in our cycles. This just makes sure that students are meeting what expectations we have of the knowledge they come out with in their particular programs, as well as over general education on the whole. So there's some defining features as occurs with each cycle, or each 5-year set of standards that we look at. Sometimes in previous times it was articulation and transfer. These are the areas in this 15 to 20 quality assurance funding cycle that have more the substantive changes. So for our academic programs, so programs either are accredited through a national accrediting agency, or if there's not a one available that really makes sense for that program, we'll use a program evaluation to make sure that the standards are staying high, that the rigor is there to prepare students for the workplace. And what we did is, in the program evaluation process, you can either use an academic audit or a program review. And in this process, in the evaluation that we went through this in preparing for this cycle, was to gather some groups of faculty and really dig into the rubrics that are used as a part of that program evaluation or academic audit, and revise the rubrics in a way that increases uniformity across the baccalaureate, the certificate and associate, and the graduate rubrics, that reflect some of the more recent research-based practices and align more closely with the SAC COC standards. For our institutional satisfaction study, we capitalized this year and allowed a unique schedule for the universities and the community colleges. So the universities will be using the National Survey of Student Engagement, that's the NSSE, and then the Faculty Survey of Student Engagement, and then an Alumni Survey of Student Engagement. The community colleges will be able to focus some on those Tennessee Promise students. So they'll use the SENSE survey, so the survey of entering student engagement. They actually take that in the first couple weeks that they step foot on campus. So we're really excited. They'll take it in August or September of this year. So those first time they set foot on that campus, kind of what's the environment that it's engaging them, that's meeting them, what kind of learning is occurring on those on their campuses. And then also the general community college student survey of student engagement. And then the year 5, both of these groups will have the opportunity in a comprehensive report to really dig into kind of what does the data say and how does this shape what we do for our students going forward. Everybody's talking about adult learners, as we should be. the way that we've addressed this with quality assurance funding is instead of having it as one of the focus populations that you could pick from, we put it out front as something that all of our institutions are going to have to make an effort to address. It's a vital part of the Drive to 55, and we've seen it really aligns with the master plan and what's going on with Tennessee Reconnect. But so all of our institutions will be focusing on adults, and so there's a qualitative and a quantitative piece. The quantitative piece is your graduation rates and your retention. If you can get an adult to stay on your campus for a year, chances are they're going to complete. There are students that want to get in there and get the job done. Then there's the other side of it is more of a qualitative, and it's a self-study, creating an action plan, and then really getting the whole campus involved in addressing the needs that are unique to adult students to make sure that they have an environment that really caters to their needs as well, because it's different than the traditional student. Another piece is the Tennessee job market graduate placement. Now, so we've always talked about, or in the last few cycles, we've talked about job placement for our community college graduates. And what we're excited this year that we'll be able to do is capitalize on data from the Tennessee Longitudinal Data System, which brings together data from the Department of Education, from the Department of Labor, and THEC. So we've got one single data source that will be able to capture data about where students are placed once they leave the community colleges. So we're really excited to have that one kind of uniform look. Gives us a lot of confidence going forward in that data, and we're excited that we'll be able to utilize that data for the standard now. And finally is our student access and success. So these are our focus populations. Each institution is allowed to choose 5 populations from this list, those that are starred or new to quality assurance funding for this cycle. Obviously, adults have moved off of this list. They're in their own standalone standard, but for this year, it's the veterans that are now included, as well as the graduate degrees for some of those particular populations, but breaks down general to demographics, particular academic programs, and then to a few, and transfer, whether it's from the 2-year to the 4-year back. Any questions?
I'm sorry. I brought it up at the workshop yesterday, and I apologize. So if you look at the quality assurance funding analysis, if I recall the pie chart yesterday, it's about 25% of the allocation process, right? From the standpoint of the CCTA is the other piece. Didn't you have a chart like that yesterday? 5%. So it's even less. So my point in this is, does the commission have an understanding of the expense of generating the data for the quality assurance funding and whether it's needed anymore, as everything has gone to a mechanism that says we reward performance, right? I mean, I know it's been there a long time. We mentioned yesterday at the workshop, it's been in place, what, 40 years? And I'm just wondering whether, if you ever taken a look at the estimated costs of gathering this information and whether it's needed when you have the CCTA.
Well, as far as the costs, I don't think we've ever looked at exactly what the institutional burdens and costs are. And Betty, please correct me if I'm wrong about that. I do think, though, that the necessity of it is not at all lessened by the existence of the outcomes formula, because it's the quality complement to the very quantitatively heavy outcomes formula. So it probably is worth looking into what is the campus burden to go through the process and the value that places. But I don't think the focus ought to be lessened just because of the outcomes formula. I think.
Are there aspects of the QAF evaluation that don't impact the CCTA performance?
That do not impact
CCTA?
Yeah. I think all of QA would contribute, if I understand your question, Dr. DiPietro, all of it would contribute to the production of and quality of aspects of CCTA and Drive to 55. At least I believe it should.
So with that in mind, to my point, I guess, then aren't we duplicating the effort?
I don't believe so. I think it's because it's focused now much more on qualitative initiatives, and now in the previous cycle, and I hope my memory is right about this, there were elements of QA that were now ceded to the outcomes formula. There actually was a focus on graduation rates and counts of degrees. Those have now been set aside to focus much more on qualitative indicators. So I think it's more complementary, not duplicating, but complementary to the outcomes formula. Yeah.
But we will take a look at the cost of doing this, because I think that this group needs to realize the cost benefit of the analysis if it's merited, if it's 5% of the allocation process.
I think the doctors asked a good question, and I remember having this discussion when we were working on the original formula, and I think there was, for whatever reason that I still can't articulate, a great deal of heartburn about the thought of the QA portion not being included in this. And so, as I've heard the presentation, I'm probably even more puzzled now after we've been through this for a few years why we have to continue with the QA piece, and I think it's not clearly articulated.
We'll work on that. And again, the campus burden is important, but having that qualitative component that sits alongside the quantitatively heavy outcomes formula is a good match, we think, and serves the state well, we think, going forward.
Well, then I think we just need to develop a way to better articulate it then.
Fair enough.
Because I don't think we have that right now.
Thank you.
Item F would be the outcomes-based formula, Dr. Deaton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is the third component of this triad we're going to present to you for action here. I just want to briefly go through the highlights. We went through this in detail yesterday with some spreadsheets even on the screen. A few points to highlight. First is the importance of process. There was an 6-month-long committee that worked through the details here. Rarely did we find unanimity on many issues. There is a lot of complexity here, a lot of trade-offs to the decisions the formula has to make, and that's been true in the last cycle and is true now. Directly getting feedback from presidents and chancellors as to how to build a model, what its components should be, is a critical part of the process. There were a couple of changes to the outcomes that we're proposing to you that are on the screen. For the most part, the outcomes that were initiated 5 years ago have lived on now in the new iteration. So there's not a lot of significant substantive changes to the incentive structure that's in place. But we went through these in detail yesterday, and they're summarized here on the screen. That is first the community colleges, and then, of course, the universities. So those are some changes to the outcomes that we are proposing. The second major piece of the model, of course, in addition to the outcomes, is the weight structure, which tries to reflect campus mission. And this, the key part here would be to emphasize, and this is an idea that bubbled up during discussions with the Board of Regents, a consistent weighting structure across the 13 community colleges, prioritizing first associates and certificate production focused on Drive to 55 CCTA, and then allowing some flexibility down through the outcomes that would reflect campus priorities. But overall, a consistent structure that would prioritize for all 13 schools, associates and certificates, again, to reflect the imperatives of Drive to 55. Moving back, another area, focus populations. The proposal would be to add academically underprepared and to increase the premium on those populations in the model. This is probably a good juncture to say the following. There are several aspects of the model we are still wanting to work through the exact specifics on and get some details nailed down. This would be one of them, exactly how to define academically underprepared, exactly what premium to apply to it. There are others as well, and so part of what we will ask permission from you is to engage in that activity in the next few weeks. So there's still some fine-tuning to do, and this is a good example of some areas where fine-tuning is necessary in the coming weeks.
Can I step back for a
Yes,
second,
sir, please.
Dr. Deaton? Now, there's obviously two different formula review committees. There's one that's a statutory set, and there's one that's a subset of this body. And I seem to remember some different conversations occurring about the subpopulation premiums and focus population premiums. And as we prepare to vote today, I just want to make sure that well, number one, I didn't think we were at this point, frankly, but maybe we are, and I was the person in the room that didn't get that. But I want us to try and think about what this looks like. You want the authority to go back and kind of tweak this over the next 2 or 3 weeks, but I kind of, in order to vote on something, I want to be real sure that there's some type of report back mechanism to make sure that there is some type of unanimity, whether it's a telemeeting or something. There ought to be something that occurs instead of us giving y'all the authority to bless it and y'all come out and issue a report or issue the new formula, and we haven't really agreed to that. So I just want to be clear about that.
Secretary, we would fully intend to bring those substantive changes back to this body for review and action if necessary. Absolutely. Sure. Yeah. Get to a couple more elements of it. The out-of-state tuition deduction, talked about a little bit yesterday. Again, trying to remove what is in fact currently a disincentive in the formula for out-of-state students. This is another issue similar to the last one on which there's not unanimity, but we think the majority of the opinion is to remove that as an item and to link more directly outcome performance changes with state funding changes that result from the model. Finally, a structural change that doesn't really change too much the fundamental calculations, but is a different way of presenting the model in terms of share of the total, what share of the total pie that is available would each institution receive. The model would still allow us to calculate and present to you a total recommendation of new money, new investment that reflects outcomes, but changing the structure to reveal shares of total. And what this does, and this is key, is it allows the model to really establish a very equal starting point, which is each school's current funding totals, and then adjust those as necessary based on how the outcomes change from the new data. So again, to reiterate, there are elements we want to continue to work on and fine-tune. The structure that we're presenting to you today we feel is sound with the adjustments that were made, continuing to work through the committees and the systems and campuses, those final details, and of course bringing them back here for review by the Commission. That's an overview, Mr. Chairman, of the model, and again, our suggestion would be to take them up as a group.
Right. Any questions for Dr. Deaton about that aspect of what we have to vote on? So to remind the Commission, we will be considering items D, E, and F as one item in which to approve or deny. At this point in time, unless there's an objection, I'll entertain a motion for adoption of items D, E, and F. So moved.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
let me try to craft a motion that also recognizes the concerns well expressed here. I'll make the motion that we combine the master plan, quality assurance, and outcomes-based formula into a single action item. Furthermore, I move that we approve these items for immediate implementation with authority to staff to continue to adjust and refine, fine-tune the necessary details with the understanding that any substantive changes and final outcomes be brought back before the Commission for review and action if necessary.
So we have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Discussion on this. Hearing none. All in favor, please signify.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Final action item we have on our agenda is the University of Tennessee Health Science Center Master Plan. And for that presentation, I would call on Dr. Ken Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Deaton, and members of the Commission. For the last several years, the Health Science Center has been engaged in a pretty significant effort in our master planning process. As a result of our internal efforts, we engaged a external consultant, Perkins & Will, to come in and assist us with that effort. And on behalf of Perkins & Will, Ms. Chris Ann Osterby is here to really walk you through the presentation. So, Chris Ann.
Morning. The most important aspect of this master plan is the fact that it was first and foremost grounded in the strategic plan that had been recently completed for the institution. It also took advantage and was very reflective of accreditation processes that were happening at the same time that planning for resources, physical resources for the institution were being considered. So the challenges and the outcomes that came from that were very programmatically driven and reflected changes that were anticipated, most probably focused on change in enrollment for certain programs, expected changes in research that were also anticipated to meet the strategic plan and the aspirations of the institution, and also to reflect some of the changes of staffing, both to support the academic programs, the research, and also because this is an academic health science center and has clinical obligations, the staff that support that part of the mission as well. If you are not familiar with the campus in Memphis, it's a very landlocked, urban-focused institution. It is not in the downtown, but lies in the Memphis Medical District to the east. You can see its partners in the Memphis Medical District highlighted. They are equally landlocked and challenged in terms of their planning and operations. And so the orange line is the district itself, the blue line are the partners, and what you see in orange is actually the property that is operated and comprises the campus of UTHSC. And it is not a typical campus. As you can see, it's very challenged in terms of an outline and perimeter that is not contiguous. So that was also a groundwork for the planning itself. Because of that, the plan also encompassed a district or a planning framework that was larger than the land and also the facilities that are currently leased by UTHSC. That was to provide flexibility for the institution in its planning because we do not have a crystal ball and aren't fully aware of properties or partnerships that might become important in the next 5 to 10 years. This framework allowed the institution to be more proactive and flexible in terms of thinking about opportunities as they arise. But most importantly, it was to look at the planning that was underway in the city for this area. There was also within the Memphis Medical District, sponsored by the Hyde Foundation, an aggressive look at redevelopment and additional amenities to make this a better partnership for all of the institutions as well as UTHSC. One of the critical concerns that we found at the beginning of the planning that trickles through all of the recommendations that followed is a deep analysis of the existing condition of the facilities. We looked at both the deferred maintenance as well as the fit to program, the capacity of facilities that range from over 100 years old to primarily even up to 50 years old, and their ability to actually deliver the programs in the manner that students, faculty, staff who are being recruited and retained would expect, especially if they were being compared with peers across the state and across the region and country. And so you can see the large orange portion of this pie, roughly 38% of the facilities on campus are not essentially positioned for or valued for long-term investment. They do not fit the program and serve the needs of the institution. Another significant percentage, 41%, would need significant upgrades. And the 21% that you see in green represents, of course, the current investment, very sizable investment that's been made in the last few years in terms of both adding new facilities to the campus and significant reinvestment in existing facilities. We looked at the utilization of space, every kind of space, academic, research, laboratory, offices, student services, gathering spaces, even down to support spaces for the physical plant. And so in each of these, you can see, and I'll point it out for those in the back, this is the academic space on the campus. This system of 4 bars replicates itself for research, for administrative space, for, if you will, the support space, for fitness and wellness, recreation spaces, facility support, clinical and unassigned. In every case, this far bar is essentially what is the current assignable square feet. We compared that to both THEC and national guidelines for what the expected assignable square feet would be. We also then looked at essentially projects that were underway, this third bar, and that change that's predicted in the future because of construction that's already underway or planned and anticipate to go forward. And then we compared that as well to essentially the need that is coming from the change in students and in research. If you look at the deficit in space, that is indicated in small or large extents, and you can also see that portion, in a sense, of the deficit, which is also in the black, that comes from this facility condition. So the bottom line is the space need for the institution overall is nearly 575,000 assignable square feet, but over 430,000 of that, so well over 4/5 of that need, is caused by concerns about the facility condition and the recommendations for ultimate removal of those underperforming facilities. So the net increase of space, if you will, the net need is much smaller. It's under 150,000 assignable square feet. So trying to create a flexible framework for that change to occur over time, both in a logical way and one that took advantage of adjacencies, which are very critical in an academic health science center in terms of academic research and clinicians all being in the right locations. Again, using that same color code, anything in this, the darker gray, are existing facilities. This truly is the academic core of the institution. A simulation center is now underway. So ideally, academic expansion would occur in close proximity to that. Significant research expansion and replacement of aging research facilities that are underperforming would be in the middle of that. Also in close proximity both to the clinicians, the researchers and the faculty and students would be the clinical partners and clinical expansion, in this case for more of a primary care facility, but also specialty facilities are targeted around core partnerships with Regional 1 and Le Bonheur Children's Hospital, with the VA also close by, and also close by, in a sense, to other academic partners here, the Baptist School of Nursing, and off the corner, Southwest Community College. There were significant concerns about the student experience in terms of amenities for them, as well as faculty and staff. So on the perimeter of the campus, the master plan positions working with partners the ability to enhance housing offerings, since all of the housing has now been removed from the campus, as well as improvements to student support facilities near the existing recreation center and where other amenities are on a major street leading in and out of downtown Memphis. So to conclude, in terms of the phasing, what you'll see in each of these, anything that's red is the new facility. If it's blue, it is recommendations for renovations, improvement to existing facilities. And then it's also showing some of the other partnerships that were discussed with the medical district and the city of Memphis in terms of open space and streetscape improvements, because most of the out-of-door space on this campus is, in a sense, city space or part of the district. It is not a typical campus. And so you can see what we talked about, those initial investments in academic and research, which would position also, in a sense, the removal of facilities that are already occupied, as well as a focus on the student experience to aid in recruitment and retention for students and faculty. Phase 2 and Phase 1 really is very much grounded on projects that are underway and would expected to be complete ideally within the next 5 years, but with flexibility if that's not able to be accomplished. Phase 2, you'll see a lot of what is projected is actually then removal of some of these aging facilities because they've been replaced in the core, and then continuing to build on that core experience, both in terms of partnerships for research and some of the partnerships that we talked about in clinical facilities. And then finally, in Phase 3, it is the completion of the improvement of the overall district, working with the city and the Memphis Medical District, some multi-purpose partnership facilities, again, on the perimeter. And you'll see the next round of recommended renovations, in these case, the Hyman Administration Building and Johnson Building, some of the research facilities and academic facilities here that would be essentially, at that point, catching up with all of the concerns about deferred maintenance and missing quality and types of facilities, and able to reinvest in existing facilities. So that is the conclusion of the presentation, a vision of what this might all come together to improve the delivery of instruction, learning, and clinical care and research that comes from that. Any questions that we might be able to answer?
That is an action item, so at this point in time, I will entertain a motion to approve the proposed master plan.
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. All in favor signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. That concludes the action item portion of our agenda. We'll now move forward to the information items, and I will call on Ms. Emily House to tell us about the Education Lottery Scholarship.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Dr. Deaton, members of the Commission. I will speak very briefly, as people start to exit, I will speak very briefly about our annual report related to the TELS program, the Tennessee Education Lottery Scholarship Program. Just to give a primer for those who are new to this arena or those who need a refresher, this is the state's merit-based lottery-funded aid program. It is a very large program, first implemented about 10 years ago. This program primarily serves students of traditional age, recent high school graduates entering higher education, and it has three big scholarship types that we most often talk about: the Hope Scholarship, the Aspire Supplement, the GAM Supplement, and a smaller program, which is an Access program. I won't go through the eligibility criteria, just please note that some require both an ACT score and a GPA to be eligible. Some require one or the other. The Aspire supplement is an income-based supplement for those who have a family income of $36,000 or less. The GAM supplement is an additional merit component for those students who are higher achieving, and please note that for that scholarship, a GPA and an ACT score benchmark must be met. The award amounts do differ by institution type and by enrollment status. I won't spend too much time speaking about this matrix here because these award amounts are actually changing, some of them beginning in fall 2015. I say that only to say that while they are changing moving forward, everything that I'll be discussing in terms of funds allocated and things like that have to do with these older award amounts. And I will go through this very quickly. Much more detail is presented in the report itself, which is available online, and I'm happy to share these slides or speak with anyone after the fact in the interest of time right now. So the HOPE base award amount remains the largest component of the TELS program. About 64% of those who receive an award receive a HOPE award. The next largest is the Aspire supplement, which is the supplement on top of the HOPE base amount, followed by the GAMS award, and then the Access award, as I mentioned, is a very small program. Speaking about student demographics, and you'll see that many of these figures that I'm presenting have been very flat over time. The trend has not really changed substantially over time. For the award type, with the exception of the recession, you can see that more students were receiving the income supplement on top of the base during the recession in the late aughts. Right, Crystal? The late aughts. Similarly, it's typically been students who are Caucasian making up the majority of TELS award recipients. Almost 80% of recipients are white students, followed by African American students, and then all other races and ethnicities are lumped into the other category, students who identify as Asian, Hispanic, and many other subgroups of students. Similar to many merit programs in many other states, the population of students who receive this award are students who are of middle and high income, which is not something unique to Tennessee. This is often cited as a criticism of merit aid in general, and Tennessee is no exception to that. So it really is students who are not low income. It's mostly those who are higher income receiving this award. 97% of first-time freshmen on UT campuses receive a TELS award, followed by 83% at TBR institutions. TECUA is not included on this figure, but Patrick, who is not here today, let me know that about 80% of first-time freshmen at TECUA institutions do receive a TELS award, followed by about 50% at community colleges. So there's a good portion of first-time freshmen at each of the systems really do receive this award. And this is all TELS awards: HOPE, Aspire, GAMS, and Access. Again, I won't go too much into the criteria for retaining your award. You do need to earn a particular GPA at 2.75 for the first 2 years, roughly, at a four-year institution, and then a 3.0 moving forward from that, your third and fourth year. There are some caveats to that and some provisional circumstances that I won't delve into now. All that to say that overall, about close to 60%, about 56% of students renew their TELS awards from year one to year two. And again, this is all different types of scholarships. So about 60% of students do meet those academic benchmarks between year one and year two to maintain their award. And you can see there is variation by scholarship type. I won't, again, go into the characteristics of each scholarship, but you can tell, this should not be shocking. Those who are very high achieving are those who are more likely to be high achieving in college, hence the 91% year one to year two retention for the GAMS award recipients, for example. The TELS program and receiving a TELS award does not necessarily seem to be the linchpin for many students to remain in college. For some students it is, I don't mean to minimize that, but of those who did not meet the academic benchmark to keep their award between year one and year two, so freshman year to sophomore year, or year one to year two at a two-year institution, more than 60% of them came back. So it's not necessarily, for many students, a financial lever that is keeping them enrolled. Many of them enrolled despite having lost their award. And again, there's variation by type. Overall, about 30%, that's the blue bar all the way to the right, of students graduate with the award intact. So this is a 5-year graduation rate, which is sort of odd, but the reason we do a 5-year grad rate is because that is the duration that students are eligible for the award. So you can receive a TELS award for up to 5 years. So again, there are differences by scholarship type, but overall, only 30% of students across the board, across all recipients, are keeping the award through graduation. The program has grown substantially over the past decade. It began with about 30-ish thousand award recipients, about $86 million. It has grown substantially from there to $270 million. And it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison. There have been changes in award amounts and allocation, things like that, but this is really just to demonstrate the growth of the program over the past decade. The base HOPE award covers about half of tuition and fees at public institutions. I cannot speak for private institutions here, but about half of tuition and fees are covered by the base HOPE award. And as related to Tennessee Promise, which is really the program that's getting much more airtime, whereas the TELS program is just such an institution now, funds from the Lottery Reserve were transferred to a trust to help fund the Tennessee Promise program. This is something we've discussed before, but to be clear that $100 million still does remain in the reserve for the lottery scholarship program. So if one year we don't sell enough tickets, there's still going to be enough money to fund scholarships. And in the spirit of Tennessee Promise being a last dollar scholarship, it's important to note that a TELS award will hit first. So that will be applied after federal aid, after a Pell Grant or any other federal aid is applied to a student's financial aid package. The TELS awards will hit after that, and then Tennessee Promise will hit last. Upcoming, there will be some changes to the HOPE and Aspire amounts. Speaking about HOPE very quickly, instead of a base award for fall and spring, I'm not talking about summer, for fall and spring being $4,000 across all 4 years, year 1 and 2 will be a $3,500 award for a student who is enrolled full-time. Years 3 and 4 will be a $4,500 award. Similarly, at 2-year institutions, the award will increase from $2,000 to $3,000, again for a student who is enrolled full-time. And the reason for this is to help fund Tennessee Promise, as well as to begin to address some of these issues related to scholarship retention. So will this change in the distribution of the award amounts? Because it's still $16,000 for a student who's enrolled at a four-year institution. But the distribution is different, and will that distribution be enough of a lever to encourage students to meet the benchmarks and retain their awards? Remains to be seen. Check back next year. Changes to Aspire. Students at community colleges are no longer eligible for the Aspire supplement. That is basically because the award amount is changing from $2,000 to $3,000 on the base HOPE. So students are basically made whole without that supplement. And many of these students are full Pell eligible, as well as Tennessee Promise students who are not really losing out in this situation. It's just where the money is actually coming from. Not have a discussion, but if you would like to discuss anything with me, please get in touch. And I'm happy to go into any amount of detail that would be useful for anyone. And very quickly, are there any questions or comments related to this? Okay.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
Much. Okay, next we'll talk about the diversity and teaching grant. Is that the, okay, Mr. Herbert Brown.
Morning, Mr. Chair, Dr. D. For several years, the Tennessee Higher Education Commission has administered the Diversity in Teaching Grant. It was formerly known as the Minority Teaching Education Grant. Every 2 years, THEC provides funds to institutions across the state to develop programs that increase the number of K through 12 teachers who are from underserved groups who are committed to using diversity as a tool for instruction. Basically, the program emphasizes curriculum and retention strategies for teacher education students to, one, progress through their teacher education programs, two, pass the praxis examination, and ultimately to obtain licensure. Each program is required to partner with LEA. The great part about this, and it's a tremendous benefit to the teacher education students, they receive real-time training in diverse classroom settings, and the wisdom, the knowledge, the best practices that they receive from their mentor teachers is invaluable. A committee convened on April 28th. The committee consisted of multiple K through 12 and higher education experts. Thank everyone that served on the committee. We reviewed and evaluated 8 different proposals from institutions across the state, and the proposals were evaluated based on the following criteria. THEC awarded 4 institutions with the maximum program cost of $100,000 for the grant cycle. So it's a 2-year grant, so 2015 through 2017. As you can see, there are 2 UT institutions and 2 Takua institutions. There's a program summary for each of the 4 funded programs in your workbook, so I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Very much. Now, to give us the view from 30,000 feet, I'd like to invite Dennis Jones, if you don't mind, Dennis, to sort of give us your thoughts now at the conclusion of the meeting.
Very briefly, first of all, congratulations to both the commission and the staff for making, I think, a lot of progress over the last year on the master plan, on the funding model, on all aspects of what you've been doing. I mean, you just approved a very large chunk of stuff. And just a couple of observations about that chunk of stuff. First of all, this is a dynamic process. I mean, you know, just because you've said grace over the master plan and some things, these will continue to evolve if they're any good at all. You know, you don't put these in concrete and then say we got that done for a decade. There are lots of things to still be done inside the framework of what you've improved. Just just a couple of observations about the master plan. One of the things that has been mentioned in many ways, but doesn't come together quite yet inside the master plan, is the regional feature of some things. You talk about communities as part of the adult, the Lumina grant, and et cetera. But the reality is that you're going to have to think about regional approaches to access and success, because there are very different levels of student access, success, and college attainment across this state. And so how you address those is going to be important. And there are also you talk about the workforce connections in the master plan. There's going to be regional workforce differences that you're going to have to pay attention to, as will be revealed in your work with ECD and with labor, where the workforce needs are. They're not uniform across the state. So how region and community gets reflected in a statewide endeavor get to be really important. We're working in several other states, the most complicated of which is California. And there's no way to even address California higher ed except as a set of regions. It's just too big, too complicated. But the reality is that all states are regional in economies, in demographics, and et cetera. So to continue to work on that nuance within what you've put in place is going to be important. And that in some ways, at some point you may want to look at how that connects to the funding model. That there are some places that's in Oregon and some others, one of their subpopulations, focus subpopulations, is underserved counties. So you might, there are ways to think about connecting the dots. The other piece that's already been mentioned, David mentioned it as the ongoing piece, but probably the biggest remaining uncompleted piece of the master plan is the question of how you pay for D55. And this is one of those things where, you really do have to think about all funds, all sources. And then the question is, what's the strategy that you use to put all of that together in a way that lets you afford the aspiration that you've articulated? And nobody's figured that one out completely yet, no state. The only other thing that I would say there was a conversation about the quality assurance funding. I'm not so sure that it's the right configuration and et cetera, but I will argue that in every state where we've helped build funding models, the first pushback is from faculty about how do you ensure quality in this when everything is driven by numbers. And so the importance of having some protection in here for assurance of quality, whether it's done the way you're doing it or some other way, and it's open for conversation, I think. But the importance of some quality component, either as part of or sitting alongside the funding model, is protection in many ways for the funding model itself. And this is true in states that have a lot more invested in the funding model as far as performance than Tennessee. It's always the issue of, we can generate a lot more degrees if you just turn us into diploma mills. And there needs to be some conversation, some ability to say we are maintaining quality in the process of getting to the numbers that we are pursuing. So, end of statement. Congratulations again for lots of good work on lots of people's parts.
So, Dr. Jones, so it strikes me that the quality of an academic program really rests at the university that is responsible for kicking it off the ground and making sure that it happens, right? I mean, we do academic program reviews routinely. We have to look at the quality of our programs. We have outside committees come in and evaluate that. So, in all due respect, I see your point if we end up becoming diploma mills. But, if you look at setting aspirational goals like we do and looking at quality as part of that from the standpoint of the institutions we name, then we're targeting institutions, and by the process of academic program reviews, the institution itself is assuring that, right?
Well, I mean, there's, at the end of the day, the faculty and the institutions are the guardians of institutional quality. I mean, I think that there's no question about that. So yes. At the same time, it's the same faculty that will say that we're the guardians of it that tend to be the biggest critics of outcome-based funding for the reasons that I've articulated. So having them engaged in a process that helps to ensure their voice in all of this may be important. I mean, this is a long conversation, Joe,
All right.
but all I'm saying is that assurance of quality in these processes tends to be a really important issue, and how one addresses it needs to be transparent and on the table.
I would agree. I mean, I think looking back, and John will remember it too, when the CCTA came into being, and in that first year or so, as we started to work with the legislature, there was this issue of on the part of policymakers who felt that we would dummy down the approach in order to produce more graduates per unit of time in order to see our reward. And the faculty themselves, when you got them around the table, and we did this at 2 or 3 retreats or more, the reality was they want to perform at a high level, they want a quality program, and they don't want to be in a position where their worry was, hey, Joe, you're going to make us dummy this down so we perform better. And we said, no, we won't.
Yeah. So it's the same conversation.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Any other questions for Dr. Jones? Thank you.
Well, the one thing I'll just, for reasons unknown to me, add to the conversation. The one thing I have heard is that at the commission level, quality cuts across all institutions, and people being what people are, quality is absolutely assured at my institution, but I'm not so sure about Ralph's institution, and the idea that it's uniform within the systems, I think, has value, as opposed to we know in our institution that we're doing this, but I'm not so sure about this one and this one and this one. So it has that value at least.
Thank you. We will call on Dr. Deaton for a comment about the fall meeting that's coming up November 18 and 19. But before I do that, I would just ask commission members, if you would please, to stay a few minutes after the meeting. We're going to try to get a photograph with everybody to update it. The one on the website is pretty old, so we'll update it.
I'm sure you guys are in it, to be honest. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would, after this, also ask, return back to the audit committee written report, just to make sure we cover that as well. Fall meeting, November 18th and 19th. Many of the tools that were approved in concept today will be utilized for that meeting. The funding formula, quality assurance. I do want to note for the record that Comptroller expressed similar questions about the unprepared feature that we talked about today. He had similar questions that we've talked about over the last 6 months. We spoke this morning, actually, so I want to make sure that's on the record that he asked for that as well. But in the meantime, we will get to work and be ready for the November 18th and 19th meeting.
And ladies and gentlemen, I skipped the audit committee report, which is a written report you should have in your folders. Are there any questions about that audit report that you'd like to raise at this time? Okay. If not, and no other business, meeting is adjourned.